Give me 2 seconds. Gotta make sure it works. Just for me. I mean, it's not just for you, but just in general, I've got more time. So, but yes, I'm always interested in conversation. So, primarily for you, Nitro Gold. So, yeah, I've recently become pro-life. I would absolutely accept arguments to become pro-choice again. Are you watching the World Cup tonight? Nah, probably not. I've never been the biggest soccer fan. I've always watched, like, basketball a little bit more, football sometimes. I don't know. I never got big into soccer, so I don't take the World Cup as seriously. Knicks won it, yeah. Yep, finally the Knicks don't suck, at least for the time being. They'll go back to sucking again eventually. It'll happen. I can't get into football because their careers are too short for me to follow. Yeah, I kind of get that. But I don't know. I think football is just such a strategic game that, like, there's so many different things you could watch in football, even if you don't know the players. Like, it's just an interesting game because every little part can cause everything to collapse. Like, if you have a bad offensive line, everything's just over for your quarterback. Like, I don't know. I think there's a lot to it strategically. So, I think, I don't know. For some reason, I just didn't get as into soccer, but I don't know. I might give it a watch. Strategy, you like chess? I used to play the crap out of chess, but I haven't played chess in a while. I don't think my chess.com account's even still active. What was your rating online? I think my Blitz rating was like, I think on the last account I had, it was like 11 or 1200 is where my Blitz got. I think my Rapid rating got up to like 14 or 1500 because I played more Rapid than Blitz. That's good for chess.com. Yeah, I took chess seriously for a while, but I haven't played in a long time. I haven't studied any theory in a long time, so I don't remember too many openings. It's really tough now on that site. Yeah, I know chess has gotten much more competitive and tough. I haven't played it in a while. You play on Lichess? Yeah, Lichess is good too. I never played on it as much. I was always more of a chess.com guy because I think I always ended up watching like Gotham Chess and Hikaru. So I ended up joining chess.com, I think mostly because of Gotham Chess. And even before that, I played that. Gotham is so funny. Yeah. I think Gotham Chess is like one of the funniest, probably the funniest chess like YouTuber streamer out there. He's fun to watch. Hikaru's just like really interesting to watch, like the way his brain works so quickly. Ready to have your mind changed? I'm always ready to have my mind changed. Always. Excellent. Here we go. All right. I'm excited because there's probably some pro-choice arguments I missed. yeah, can't wait to hear it. We'll see. We'll see if it's something along the lines of what I used to argue when I was pro-choice, probably. I know that there's a couple really good arguments. So, can't wait for it. I'm not going to debate the pro-life stance from a baby killer's position. I am just making the case for small government on the stance that government should have no control on whether or not you have the baby. Okay, so it's more of like a legal type argument or legal philosophy type argument as opposed to moral philosophy type argument. Okay. Yeah, I could be down with that. Honestly, we may end up agreeing, at least for the most part. We'll see. I'm familiar with a few of the legal arguments. So we'll see. Because, yeah, there's a few interesting ones. So as a newly to be mother, what decides on whether you have the baby or not? So I guess you could either take like the moral perspective or legal. Since we're talking legal, I guess the legal perspective would just be whether or not you have a right to do it or not. Like a legal right or not. So, and if we're talking moral, it's whether or not you think it's morally good or not morally good. But yeah, that's the same with all moral decisions, I guess. Whether or not you do it is ultimately going to be if you find it to be morally good or not morally good. But yeah, from a legal perspective, it's just if you have a right to do it or not. So whether or not as a society grants you that right or if it restricts that right. Hey, John Balf. Women should have the choice. It's not a right, though. But you can always go to another state. My question is in actuality. You're going to ask your family, you're going to ask your friends, this type of thing. To some extent, I think that there's still a moral fact of the matter involved. That's going to ultimately determine if you do it or not. So, but yeah, I would agree. One of the things you may consider as a virtue is what people you trust around you think. So that certainly could go into the decision. I don't think it's like the only thing, but like, yeah, ultimately it's going to come down to a moral fact of the matter. But yes, from a practical perspective, yeah, you're going to consult people around you, etc., before making any sort of moral decision. At least a rational agent will. Irrational people won't. Which I guess could be a counter, is just there are some irrational people or family lacking people and psychopaths out there that'll get an abortion just for the sake of getting it because it's fun, but that's obviously going to be very rare. But yeah, I guess I kind of agree with this generally. But now I think we're kind of conflating a little bit of moral, though, with legal. So let's say you come to the difficult decision that you cannot have the baby. Should the government have a say in this decision? So from a legal perspective, I think that, I guess this is going to get to fundamentally what the government ought to do. I think the government is in the business of justice. And I think the government, part of justice is treating like cases alike. So I would actually compare the decision to have an abortion to a lot of other like morally like kind of ambiguous things. So like other question things or other forms of like sexual morality the government gets involved with, things like necrophilia and like things like bestiality, and like there aren't like clear moral arguments against these, but yet the government gets involved anyway just for the sake of justice. So I think the government has a role in playing in society to get justice. Because if we have half the country or half of a society that thinks it's wrong and half that thinks it's right, what's going to happen is the side that thinks it's wrong is going to demand justice for the wrongness that the other side did. So I think the government has an obligation to step in and seek justice on behalf of whoever's correct, I guess. So yeah, that's one of the roles of the system. So it's going to be the primary role of the justice system is to seek justice. So there's going to be a question of, is it an injustice or not? So why did the government hand the decision over to the states instead of outlawing it? Yeah, because I think that from a federal perspective, it was very, very difficult to make a decision as to whether or not there is like a injustice across the entire country. So like there seemed to be very high concentrations of people that found it morally right or morally okay to have abortions, and then there's large groups of people that find it morally wrong. So from a legal perspective, if you federally banned it or federally allowed it, you're going to have just straight up anarchy from states. You're going to have states just straight up ignore the Supreme Court's decision. Or you're going to create a lot of people with a strong feeling of injustice. So in a situation like that, where society hasn't duped out their moral decision yet, it seems like the government would be hard pressed to step in and like, oh, everywhere it's banned now. I think you need a very strong majority to like permanently like strip a right away. That's a very high burden. And like if the government hasn't banned something yet, it's basically still a right. So the government has a very, very high burden in banning rights. So like if we say that like all medical decisions are rights, at least for the time being, you would be hard pressed to suddenly make one of them illegal. So that's a very high burden. You need a very high majority of the country to agree, which I think should be the case from a pro-life perspective. I think that like legally, I think if like we can't come to a moral consensus on something, sometimes it's easier to just let things be up to the states. My argument is that only women having the children can decide on whether or not they can actually have it, and government cannot decide for the women. If indeed the woman isn't a psychopath like you mentioned and is like every mother we know. I guess I just disagree with that. I think that other agents have a say in what other agents do. This is just definitionally what the justice system is. Like, certainly we would say that, like, I have a say in what people do. Like, would you say that we should legalize bestiality, for instance? Because that's just someone's decision to be with an animal in a sexual way. Like, that was just their decision. Why does anyone else get a say in saying that's wrong? They didn't harm anyone else. It was their decision. That seems like you wouldn't hold the standard to everything. So who would the states let have the decision if they could? Local governments? Yeah, if you have a state that's like a swing state, it might make sense to leave it to like local governments. But most states are going to have like a majority opinion. They're going to be red states or blue states. So especially like the biggest and most influential states are all going to be red states or blue states. You're going to have like your Texas, Florida, New York, California. And it would just make sense to act as a unit because you have overwhelming consensus. And who would the local governments leave it down to if they could? No one. I think you have to have some form of government. Once you reach like local government, I think you're sort of at the lowest you can go without anarchism. Like inevitably there has to be some rule of law somewhere. It's either okay or it's not okay. You can't have like a government that's just non-existent or non-involved to no extent at all, unless it's an anarchist government. So I guess the local government would be the lowest you could go. But maybe, in other words, the mother-to-be is having the child with consensus from her family and friends. Child with consensus from her family and friends. Yeah, I just don't buy that this argument holds, because we ban other things that's just like you could maybe start to argue this about incest now, that like if two twin brothers, which they will never produce a like messed up incest child, engage in incest and their family consents to it, that's none of the government's business. But yet it seems like we ban this anyway because enough people say, ugh, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that, so the government has to step in and get justice, otherwise you achieve anarchy. Like, I just don't know if we would say this about anything else. If something's wrong and enough people find it wrong, the government has an obligation to step in and enact justice on behalf of the majority and to maintain order. But you just allowed the federal government to hand the decision to state and state to local. So why not local to family and friends of the mother? Because you wouldn't do this to anything else. And I personally don't think it should be handed to local per se. I think that's just something like swing states will do. I think most states are fine keeping it at a state level. Maybe very specific swing states should keep abortion like local, or like be cautious with their laws. But I just don't think we would do this with anything else. I think the government is in the business of justice. So like if most of the country feels a grave injustice for something going on and the government allowing it to go on, they have to step in, or you're just going to have rebellion and anarchy. You're not going to have a government. Like, I think now we're just going back to the fundamental foundations of the law in general. Like, the law comes from us. If we decide that something is a broad injustice, then the government ought to act on it. But don't you get it? The very act of handing over the decision to something more local is the idea behind the idea of having the mother decide. I don't think it's the same thing, because now you're talking about individual agents and not governments anymore. This seems like a category error. I think it's different. When you're talking legal, you're just talking government. If you want to talk moral, I think, yes, obviously the decision's in the hand of the mother, but that's not a legal question. That's a moral question. The mother gets a moral choice. The question of legality is strictly the realm of governments. It's not the same thing. Like, what... Let's say you're the father-to-be, and you and the mother-to-be and friends and family say there's no way to raise the child. What now? Is a foster care available? Yeah, I think this... So this is now a moral question instead of a legal question. I just want to point out. So morally, I think it would still be wrong. I would say that it's a violation of a courage virtue. I would say that there's just a fact of the matter that abortion is wrong if we're going to switch to morality instead of legal. I think it violates courage. So, like, if something's an inconvenience to you, you just decide, I'm going to get rid of it and kill it. It feels like a violation of virtue there, particularly courage. It also is doing a vice called instrumentalizing something. So I'm treating the fetus or the zygote as a means to an end instead of a means in itself, which is a bad thing to do. You shouldn't do that to things. But is foster care always available? I don't think it's literally always available to everyone. But I don't even think that you should innately give your kids up for adoption if in almost any situation, unless you're literally a psychopath or like a drug addict and the state like takes them from you because you're just genuinely incapable. But yeah, I think foster care is not always available. I think it's available most of the time. Hey, what's up, Keoning bastards? All these idiots. How many children is suffering in the world? I don't see you fuckers doing anything about it. That's a very high-level argument, my friend. I think you should do things about anyone suffering in the world and help. I try to do whatever I can within my means, which I think you should do. But I agree, there's certainly some pro-life people that just seem to do it for the sake of like money or something or grift. So, and they're not like interested in morality or making the world a better place. So, if that's what you mean to say. So, the government without foster care, you should have the say over friends and family. Oh, so as the government without foster care, you should have the say over friends and family. Yeah, I think you should still have a say. If the majority of people there agree that this certain thing is wrong, one of the duties of the government is to step in and seek justice. So yes, you should still act. I don't think foster care is like the only deciding factor for a legal system. And I think ultimately, like, municipalities can communicate with other municipalities. Like, I think if Child Protective Services gets involved in something, they get involved no matter what. I don't think there's counties free from their jurisdiction. I don't know if that's true. I think you would just go to a foster system in a different area. But if the state truly deemed you like, oh, you're a danger to this child, we're going to take it from you. I think that's going to happen no matter where you are, but I guess it depends on what you mean, but yes, I think the innate duty of government is to do the will of the people. If the will of the people is to ban abortion, then they should ban abortion. I mean, that's just the role of government, local, state, and federal. So if you get a supermajority in a state, the state should ban it. If you get the supermajority in the country should ban it countrywide. Okay, what about the scenario where people are having children like crazy and the government is just handing over checks to raise the kids? I think that's a virtuous thing to do. I'm certainly pro-welfare from like a liberal perspective. I think you should help abandoned kids. And this isn't true in the West, and it's certainly not true. The richer your society gets, the less children you have. But there's no financial way to pay for it. So if we were talking about a hypothetical situation where a government runs out of money and can't support us having more people, I don't think the solution is to kill all the people. I think your solution is to find more money That seems like a like hyper authoritarian solution, something like China did, where like, oh, we think that we're having too many people, we're gonna start like killing and imprisoning any of the extras you have. That's, I think most people would say that's wrong. At that point, the government just failed. So I don't think for the government's failures you should start executing people. That's a wild response. I don't see how that's... Actually, I think that's a gross response. I don't think you would hold that for anything else. I don't think you would say like the China's one-child policy was good. No. Especially in... I don't know. I can't think of any scenario where like the government just fucked up its finances, so now we start executing people. Well, we just stop people from having more kids, like force them to not have children, or start executing them. That seems wild. But this government cannot even pay to get over climate change. Why would it pay for children to be made? And I didn't say execute. I said not during a period in the birth cycle. Yeah, that was a bit of a misspeak on my part. I tried to correct myself at the end there. That's a little bit too moralistic of language. But yeah, I don't think you force people to stop having kids, or you just start stepping in and paying people to not have kids, I guess. Like, I think all of that's like unvirtuous. This government cannot even pay to get over climate change. In like a hypothetical scenario, I don't think climate change trumps like basic rights. So is the morning after pill killing a baby? Oh, I just want to be clear here. This is a pivot to a moral argument. This is no longer legal. No, I don't think it's killing a baby. I think it's killing a zygote. I think baby implies some other stuff like formed agency. I don't think a zygote. I think it just has potential for where is the line? I think abortion at any point at all is wrong. Where it becomes so wrong that it's like blatantly murder is probably like agency, once the potential for agency is there. So like once the brain's formed. Once the brain's formed, you're just flat out murdering an agent, which is an innate self-evident wrong. And before that, you're just still committing wrongs. They're just not as bad as like straight up murder. So like killing like a zygote, for instance, a brain is murder. Okay, so you argue what I used to argue pro-choice wise from a moral perspective. I think that's like the best argument is like agency or the full formed mind. Yeah, I would say at that point it's blatant murder. But before that, I think literally any act of abortion, I would even say like Plan B and like even fertility clinics, it's a little bit, there's a little bit less virtue in that than not doing those things. So it's basically going to come down to, I think that there's a fact of the matter. I think that just instrumentalization's wrong, so just treating things as a means to an end is wrong. I think Plan B is the morning after pill. Yeah, same thing. Plan B and morning after pill. I don't think the morning after pill's killing a baby. I think it's killing a zygote. And killing a zygote, it's still killing something, just it's instrumentalizing something, and it's also showing a lack of courage, which courage is a virtue. So I think failing to have more virtue is bad. So therefore, any act of abortion at all at any stage is bad. Now, there's a degree of badness to each stage. Like, you know, killing a bunch of zygotes is like, I would compare it to like, I guess like minor animal abuse almost, of like a very, very low animal, or almost like slapping a fish for the sake of slapping fishes. I think it's just kind of like, that's weird. Like, you should strive to not be in a society that does that. I don't know if it should be illegal at that point, but it's certainly like, we shouldn't be encouraging that. We should be telling people to their face, stop doing that. Find a better way for fertility. Find, don't waste all these zygotes. Like, do something else. But who can tell if the zygote is even feeling pain? Maybe its place is drunk off the plan B and floating in the ocean somewhere. How do you instrumentalize? What is right for a zygote? Yeah, so I think just doing something for the sake of doing it is always unvirtuous or wrong. So, like, for instance, if you pick up, you wouldn't think twice if it was bacteria. So this is where we're just going to disagree, because I believe that just doing stuff for the sake of doing it is always less virtuous than not doing it for the sake of doing it. So an example would be if you pick up a rock and just chuck it for the sake of seeing a rock break. If you see your kid doing this, you're certainly going to be like, just stop throwing rocks. What are you doing? Go do something else. Like, it's not so bad that, like, obviously you're not going to, like, innately punish the kid. Maybe if they ignore you and keep doing it, because now they're basically ignoring a parental figure, which is another problem. But I would compare killing zygotes and even bacteria. If you're a scientist that just grows bacteria just to kill it, I don't think it's, like, innately, like, invirtuous or an innate vice so far that, like, oh, I'm going to actually be mad at you. I'm just going to kind of be like, why the hell are you doing that? Stop making bacteria just to kill them. The same thing, if you make zygotes just to kill them, I'm going to be like, why are you making zygotes just to kill them? Do something better. But humanity is curious by nature in order to survive. What is the bigger virtue? Not throwing the rock, or throwing the rock to learn how to survive? I think not throwing the rock for the sake of throwing the rock. If you're throwing the rock for the sake of doing an experiment to learn about what throwing the rock does, is more virtuous than just throwing the rock for the sake of seeing the rock break, or for the sake of throwing the rock. So in that scenario where I'm thinking I might learn something by throwing a rock, throwing the rock's more virtuous than just not throwing the rock, because now you're learning something. You're using your agency, which agency is innately valuable. So yeah, I would probably agree in that particular scenario it's better. But it's never going to be more virtuous to throw a rock for the sake of throwing a rock than throwing the rock for literally anything else. So if you have a purpose to throw the rock, like a better use of the rock would be like perform an experiment with it, use the rock to make a tool, refine the rock. There's so many other things you could do with the rock that you find. And there's so many other things you could just do in general. You could just keep walking. But zygotes are good for stem cells. This is the future, especially if the zygote doesn't feel any pain, wants to be part of another's genetic makeup. Yeah, this is where we're just going to disagree. This is going to be moral realism versus anti-realism, right? I think that there's facts of the matter, and I think if you accept the pro-choice position, you have to pay a very high price. You have to pay this price of basically organ harvesting or cell harvesting. Like, if we could grow in a lab, like, brainless people, like, literally they're guaranteed to never become agents or any sort of conscious being, would it be okay to, like, grow them and harvest their organs? I think you would struggle to say no to that if you're pro-choice, because they don't have the thing that you value yet. And yet that, to any rational person, should be wrong. Like if you stumbled upon a scientist growing fetuses to harvest their blood, or even zygotes, a step smaller, you would be like, why the hell are you doing that? That would be a normal, rational response. To be like, okay, we need to ban this, or this shouldn't be the case. Like, people can't do this. But this is the price you have to pay with anti-realism, I think. You have to pay the price that you can't say some of these things that feel wrong are wrong, right? Which I think is fine, but you just have to accept that you're paying that price. And I think you would also struggle to say, like, really fucked up things like growing human brainless sex dolls would be bad, right? Because they will never have a brain, they're not useful. So, or if I use zygotes to make like real fleshlights for like sex toys, you would probably be like, you would probably have to accept that that's okay. Because, oh, the zygotes didn't feel any pain to harvest their flesh to make these things. So it's okay to build like flesh dolls out of zygotes. I just feel like any rational person is going to say none of these things are okay. And if you do think they're okay, you need to ask yourself why they're not. And then you're going to struggle to say you should be pro-choice still. But what if it's 50-50 and nobody knows if the zygote will feel pain, but it's 100% that it will save a life? If you're saving lives, it gets a little bit trickier, especially for like zygotes. Zygotes are so fundamentally low value, like they're not as high value as like a fetus or any higher stage of development, that maybe if you could use zygotes to save lives, you would actually be using them for something. That's fine. But if there's a bunch of wasted zygotes in the process, it's probably still better to improve the process. But that process probably has some virtue in it, certainly. Like, this is why I wouldn't like ban Plan B. I think it's like not bad enough to even be worried about. And same thing with fertility clinics. I think we should just continue perfecting it. But there is some like waste there, and it's like that process should be better. There's still some lack of virtue there. So that's, I guess, my response, is that there's still lack of virtue occurring. It's just so minor that it's not like wrong in the same way that like anything that we would make illegal wrong, but it's still like, we need to do better than that. Like, if you literally just can't grow the stem cells themselves, it's like, well, maybe you should work towards that, and you should stop using zygotes as fast as possible. So the president of the USA needs a zygote to live, and it's not clear whether the zygote will feel pain, but the president should still deny the zygote. Well, that's a bad example, because I would say this president should deny the zygote, but if we had a more like virtuous, good president, yeah, I think it would be okay to accept like a zygote-related treatment, whatever the hell that would be. If you're arguing it's like stem cells, I guess I just don't practically see what it would be. But if there's some hypothetical way to use zygotes to keep people alive, like, sure, but it would still be weird. Like, maybe we should work towards just making the cells you need themselves. And I feel like researchers would even still keep working towards that. Like, it feels weird to just use zygotes if you could do something better. There's still like a weirdness and wrongness to that. It's just very minor. Stem cells are only made through zygotes. We can't do it yet through raw DNA or RNA. I mean, that's the thing. You're using the word yet. Like, we should continue working towards that. Like, yes, like, this goes back to, like, the rock example. Like, yes, I would say that you're using the rock for something more virtuous, but you should keep striving to do more virtuous things. Like, I think we would be in agreement here to say that, like, it's not so immoral you should be, like, genuinely worried about it. It's just kind of like, ooh, we should continue improving our research, but not like a legal thing, certainly. But you gotta make the call as president? Wait, so I'm president? Wait, or the president in this situation? I would take the treatment, probably. I would say there's more virtues succeeding, or like more virtues occurring by continuing your life. Especially if it could, this is like, I believe in animal research, right? I'm not a vegan. So I wouldn't agree with a researcher like using unnecessary animal treatment, but like if they use the animal treatment, I'm fine with that. I'm not a vegan. So I would apply the same thing to zygotes. Like, as long as they're doing something and there's not like massive amount of unnecessary waste, or they're continuing to improve the process, I don't care. I don't think that there's any like lack of virtue in taking like a zygote based treatment. I just think it's a little bit weird still, I guess, is the only point. Look at Google. Yes, scientists can create stem cells completely without zygotes using a Nobel Prize winning technology called induced pluripotent stem cells. Oh, well, see, I mean, even researchers continued researching it until they found a more efficient method. So, I mean, that was kind of my thought, is like, well, wouldn't we be working on something a little bit more efficient than that? But that's cool that we've already found it. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be in too much disagreement here about like a zygote, or just like a super, super early development fetus. I just think doing stuff to them for the sake of doing it would be morally wrong enough to constitute penalty or badness, but doing stuff for more virtuous reasons is okay. But there's ultimately going to be more virtuous things you could do. So I don't think I disagree, because even when I was pro-choice, I would never argue, or like when I had like a less good view of pro-life position, like way back when, before I became pro-choice, I would argue like implantation. I'm less anti-pro-life and more so anti-majority of pro-lifers not adopting. It's like the vast majority of pro-lifers go, every life is precious, yet they won't dare to adopt. Yeah, so I don't think you're obligated to adopt someone if you think that abortion is wrong. I think you should try to help people. Like, I think you should strive to be as virtuous as possible. I think that there is a moral fact of the matter that applies to all humans. And all humans should work towards that moral fact of the matter, or eudaimonia, if you're like a virtue ethicist. So I would say that it would be hypocritical of a pro-life person to not work towards other virtues and get mad at people falling short of their virtues. It's more so about the children already born and struggling than caring about a child yet to be born. Yeah, I would certainly agree that there's some like hypocritical people out there that's like I would generally be a liberal, like I would agree with like welfare and all sorts of things to help struggling people out that are already out there. So 2006 is when it was discovered. Whoa, that's been around for a while. I would have thought that's like a brand new technology. That's crazy. That's just crazy that we don't do more stem cell research. Like, man, that just kind of shows how long it's been around, but like we haven't progressed with it and using it fast enough. That's interesting. But yeah, I can understand people adopting because it's not financially viable for them. The average American can't even afford themselves. But those people with an already growing family are planning to have a family and not adopting. That sickens me. I don't know how much of an obligation adopting is, because I don't think you would apply this in any other scenario. Like, I don't think if you find rape to be wrong that, like, you're obligated to go, like, face rape victims and, like, create a support group for rape victims. I don't think if you find abortion to be wrong and, like, seek to ban it, you're obligated to, like, take care of the result of that. Like, you wouldn't say it about anything else. So, like, I don't think you're obligated to adopt. I think you are obligated to generally live the good life or work towards a good life, no matter what. And failure to do so is self-evidently false. So, it's by no means a form of obligation, but more so means hypocritical. Seems hypocritical. You only care about children yet to be born, not children that are born. I don't think it's hypocritical the same way you wouldn't call, like, someone that's, like, you in the context of the group, not you specifically. Yep, I understand. I think, yeah, it's still, like, I wouldn't say you'd be hypocritical as, like, an anti-rape person or, like, anti-pedophilia person. I'll take that because that's, like, the most morally objectionable thing. Like, I wouldn't say that you're a hypocrite if you don't go out and create a support group for pedophilia survivors. Like, I don't think you're a hypocrite for not doing that. Actually, now that the zygote is off the table due to the Nobel Prize winning tech, I may be pro-life. I have to reconsider some things. Yeah, Nitro Gold, I was literally pro-choice up until, like, very recently. I would recommend looking into virtue ethics and, like, moral realism. Like, I would read some of the original writings from, like, Aristotle, and I would just read some virtue ethics stuff. I think if you accept moral realism, it becomes very, very tough to defend pro-choice. But you could still make some legal arguments. There's some tricky legal arguments, but in terms of morally, like, it's certainly not virtuous. But there's ultimately a question of how unvirtuous does something have to be to ban it. So, what do we do about someone having a lot of government subsidized babies and straining the government? Well, that's a question of welfare. Like, is someone intentionally having children to just abuse the system, or are they, like, I think we should have rules in place against that to make them work if they're, like, attempting to abuse the system. I guess that's how you fix that. You basically have a more US type system where you have to look for work, as opposed to the European model, which is a little bit more just universal or guaranteed. But it's kind of hard to say. If someone's abusing it, if it's a case that a society starts growing too quick, I think you'll never encounter that, because as people get richer and societies grow, they naturally stop having as many kids, because rich people don't have as many kids as poor people. Hey, Zach Happ. Women should have rights. Women die from a lack of access to abortion. Women should have rights. Yes, all agents should have rights. Not specifically just women, but yes, all agents, sure. Women die from a lack of access to abortion. Yeah, I don't think even the most hardcore pro-life person would agree that you shouldn't have abortions in the case of life-threatening procedures. Maybe there's a virtue argument to be had, but especially for, like, early stage abortions, like, that's no question at all. I would say that they are also hypocrites, because the vast majority of political beliefs are just armchair warriors. They will shout with a megaphone on a public street about how something is bad, but they won't do anything beyond that. And I don't even mean you should spend your whole life proving your belief, but it's like the same with people who are anti-homeless but never volunteer at a soup kitchen. Yeah, I think I actually agree with you. I think you need to like work towards a virtuous life. They do go against abortion in all cases, not life-threatening cases. I would need to see an example of someone that says that. Zach Chapp is right. Even life and death cases, you aren't even aware, bro. What the fuck? I think you're battling the voices, the demons in your head. I don't think these people exist. Can you like send me a quick video, give it a quick goog, and send me some like famous pro-lifers that are like, in the life of the mother, yeah, kill the mother. Like, I don't think any conservative would say that, any just like philosopher would say that. I've read a lot of the philosophical arguments. None of the pro-life philosophers would say that. They would all agree with you that you should allow the mother to save herself. The most pro-life people, if not all. I think you're battling demons. Can you name one if that's the case? Dude, do you know who Zach Chapp is? Or I don't. We can look. I don't know. Is this a famous person? I don't know. I'm not like that big into stuff like that. He's huge. I guess I'm just not like affected by that. I just kind of treat I just treat people with whatever their virtue is, I guess I've never been one to get like starstruck or like, oh, this is a big person. I treat it the same. But that's actually kind of concerning. If you have a lot of viewers, but you're making that a little bit of a lower level argument there, I would certainly be willing to talk about it with you, but I can you provide an example, I guess? Because I went through multiple stages. I used to be pro-choice for a long time, and I was pro-life before that. Even back when I was pro-life, I would never argue that. And all the pro-lifers I ever watched never argued that online. None of the philosophers I've read have ever argued that. Always a pleasure to learn with you. Yeah, I guess I would just need an example, I suppose. I don't know. I guess I'll give it a goog. Maybe I'll be proven wrong here. I'm open to being wrong. So what would we even Google? Pro-life philosophers who say women shouldn't get abortion in case of life or death. I don't know if I just want to use AI for that. It could absolutely hallucinate something. Does PubMed say something? Laboratory results confirm the diagnosis. The child would have various complications and would need for medical care for life. Muslim clerics in her community sparking debate between those who would allow abortion. Well, this isn't life or death for the mother. This is more for the like a eugenics type thing. Nothing came up at all for philosophers. Maybe like pro-life debaters. Lila Rose. Leela Rose. Oh, I've seen her. She would agree. She doesn't believe that a mother should kill herself to give birth to a kid, so that's not an example. She's like the only one that comes up, and it's a contradictory example. I don't think Charlie Kirk ever argued that, so it can't be Charlie Kirk. I'm trying to think back to when I like used to be a conservative or whatever before I became liberal and like more left wing. Like, did anyone argue that ever? No, I think you're fighting the demons in your head, unfortunately. I'll research it more and be good faith, but I really don't remember anyone ever arguing that ever in the history of the pro-life position. Like, that's how strong of a stance I would take on it. I mean, this is just like a pro-choice person making that same argument. Andrew Wilson doesn't argue that, and he's like a big debater right now. Like, goes by Big Papa Fascist online. Like, Lydia never argued that. Like, is there a single pro-life debater that argues that? No, no, I'm wasting my time. I would remember. There's no way. Yeah, that's brutal. I don't know. I would need an example, unfortunately. I gave it the old Goog. I don't know. Maybe if there's a particular AI you want me to use or something, but I'm pretty sure that's just like factually false. But I could be wrong. I would be open to being proved wrong. So, I mean, if you come up with the evidence, stick it in chat. Let me know. Or if you'd like to have a conversation and you have like a whole thing prepared, let me know, I guess. I'm open to being wrong on that, but I don't think anyone of influence makes that argument, and anyone who gives it 2 seconds of thought would make that argument, and I would disagree with them if they did. And I would disavow, if that is happening, I disavow it. Stop doing that. It's nonsense. But I think that's mostly a battle with demons. I don't think that's a true battle, unfortunately. Although I could be wrong, but the old Googaloo didn't reveal that. Holteron, what's up? Also, I think there are far larger issues we should try to tackle than something as trivial as abortion rights. We should focus on things that benefit society as a whole, not a small percentage. There are over 340 million people in the U.S. alone. We should be fighting for things like universal health care, public transportation, affordable housing, off-the-grid solar battery, etc., things that will benefit society as a whole. Yeah, I wouldn't say that, like, the justice is like the main priority. I guess I would kind of agree with you. It's certainly not like a top priority, but justice is nonetheless the role of the government. So if people vastly disagree on something, and there's people that feel a deep injustice towards it, it is still the role of the government to step in and stop that injustice. So it's still a role of the government. I would agree with you that it's not like the most important thing. It's still a role that's there, but yeah, I think that there's more important things to focus on, especially right this moment with the type of government we have right now, with Trump being in office. I mean, we have very, very far-right people, just wild ideas being thrown around. Like, we can't even get basic things correct, so like more controversial issues like we're not even ready to tackle yet, unfortunately. So I guess I kind of agree. The government has multiple roles. If only they could do all of them correctly, right? But that's why you should work towards that. Whatever you think will make the government do that. Vote in the people that you think will make the government do the roles that it's supposed to fill. the ultimate one is to do the will of the people. So, you know, fight back against authoritarianism and stuff first, and then work from there. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I think I'm still researching here. Yeah, I don't think that this is the case, but maybe I'm like using the wrong search term. But yeah, I don't know. I think the abortion argument. I think if you take a moral realist perspective, it gets really tricky to hold a pro-choice position. But in terms of like legal, like what priority it should take and everything, yeah, you can always make an argument. It's not like top priority, sure. It doesn't change the underlying fact of the matter discussion, like in terms of the moral argument. But yeah, you can make separate like legal arguments of like what moral issues take precedence for the government to get involved with. I think that's ultimately fair. I see you're a pro-gun. What do you mean specifically? I don't need to change the subject if you don't want to. We can leave it for another time. Yeah, I think that just everyone has a right to self-defense, and part of modern self-defense is just you need a gun. It's like the easiest way, especially for weaker individuals, to defend themselves. So I think from there, the only question is like safety. So like what type of gun laws do you need to ensure safety of the public? Because there's ultimately, like, rights aren't unlimited. One of the points of government is to limit rights. So when it comes to pro-gun, I generally like the U.S. position on guns. Maybe slightly stricter control. Like, I'm certainly not a big fan of open carry, not even from like a legal perspective. I think it's just stupid. But I think concealed carry and licensure is good. I think owning guns is good. I think it gives you the ability to not only defend yourself against others, but I think it gives you the ability to fight back in times of tyranny. And yes, I know that ultimately, like, yeah, you're not going to go literally fighting the U.S. government. Obviously, you're going to get drone striked, but it gives you you have a right to rebel, and I think that's a right that all people possess. I think your only okay shot at rebelling is like being able to make, I guess, homemade explosives and firearms. That's like the best you're going to get as a citizen. So I think you ought to have those, especially in times we live in now. Even if you're like a liberal, you should believe in gun rights right now, because all the people that have guns are the people like supporting authoritarianism right now. So if you don't get a gun, you know, if these people start going more and more insane, you need to be able to defend yourself, just plain and simple. You have a right to rebel. You know, whether or not we should be careful about who gets a gun, yeah. I mean, obviously we have to make a decision on safety, but some people, some regular civilians need guns one way or another. You just need to decide who gets them and what training they have to go through to get them. Also, my personal stance with things like abortion is I'm for it, but not because of life, soul, or whatever, because I have the live and let live ideology, where so long as they aren't actively advocating or doing harm to others, yes, babies, then who cares what they do? It's not your body, not your life, not anything. Just as much as I don't want someone to tell me what I can or can't do with my body, I don't want to tell others what they can or can't do with their body. Yeah, but that's going to be the ultimate question, though. Is there still an underlying fact of the matter of there's a thing present? Do you have a right to instrumentalize it? Do you have a right to, like, obviously just straight up kill it if you think it's alive or not alive? Like, there's other questions that matter, but yes, autonomy comes into the question. Also, you wrote there should be a price floor on grain, but I think you mean ceiling. No, I actually think it's floor. There actually should be a minimum price to purchase grain or sell grain. Um, and I can explain that further, but how can women's lives be saved? What is this? The World Health Organization. What is this? Over 700 women died from preventable causes related to pregnancy and childbirth. A maternal death occurred almost every 2 minutes. Between 2000 and 2023, the maternal mortality ratio, number of maternal deaths per 100,000 live births, dropped about 40% worldwide. Just over 90% of the maternal deaths occurred in lower middle income countries. Care by skilled health professionals before, during, and after childbirth can save the lives of women and newborns. What's the particular quote you pulled? How can women's lives be saved? I got a crash. I don't give a fuck about your fascist male rights activism slop. You're fighting against human care. I'm not into your debate, bro. Influencer trash. If you want philosophy, maybe look into feminist thinkers. Yikes, that's brutal. I am not a male rights activist at all. I understand it's difficult dealing with ideologies you've never dealt with before, but no reason to get upset. It will be okay, I promise. I'm here to help. Like, I'm here to engage in good faith. If you need me to walk you through anything, I could do it. No reason to get all bent out of shape. Man, that's brutal. Yikes. Okay, go ahead and explain why bread should cost more and not at the profit price. I'm interested in learning. Give me 1 second. Really, the whole pro-life versus pro-abortion is mostly a spiritual thing. 9 out of 10 times, the reason why people are pro-life is because their religion says that's a soul. Yeah, and by the way, this source wasn't showing me the source I asked for, which I'm not even gonna... If you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to talk about it. That's your choice. I'm not going to make you. I'm not going to. Yeah, it is what it is. That's a little bit brutal, though. Yikes. So yeah, I think that there should be price floors on grain. So like in markets, you need to have an elastic market for a market to work. So when it comes to food, particularly like grain and things that we can easily make a lot of, there's no elasticity with the market on the supply side. So there's actually farmers right now that are just massively going out of business. Small farmers too. It's not like just large farmers. Because they literally can't sell their grain for enough money to make a profit. It's impossible. The reason why is because food is so easy to grow that even having a few medium-sized farmers in an area will feed a population throughout the whole growing season. So what this means is this is actually a time the government needs to step in on the side of the supply side and basically be like, okay, the supply can't function without intervention. Like if food is that easy to grow, supply can't properly shift to meet demand. Supply is always like way too high over demand, which means that you need to artificially close that gap to make it so that farmers can actually survive. Now, of course, this would have some effects, right? It would make some grain-based stuff more expensive. But what's crazy is like we so overproduce it in this country, we end up just like turning most of it into biofuel we never use, or it's just straight up gone to waste. So, yeah, I think the government does need to step in on the side of the supply side there. That's one of the few examples. Very, very few examples. it's just so easy to make food that you inevitably overproduce it, and so you saturate the market. So you need to drive up prices to prevent farmers and like food manufacturers from going out of business. I hate when the source articles don't actually show the source. Like it will say scientists discovered but won't link me to the data sheet. Yeah. Well, the issue with most farmers isn't that they can't make a profit, but most farmers outpace themselves. Like you can start up a small farm and sell dozens of crops every day at an affordable price. But you have these crazy small-time farmers who think they could grow exotic crops, hard to handle animals or expensive machinery, and then wonder where all their money went. Yeah, that's true too, that some of it, yes, you're ultimately going to have like a personal responsibility portion to where it's just people making poor decisions at the end of the day. But at a societal level, it's just not a very flexible market. It's just a very tough market to let the supply adjust to where it needs to adjust. Like there's so many people willing to grow crops throughout the world, especially agricultural nations that aren't quite industrial yet. They rely on it. They're so desperate to sell, they'll sell at much cheaper prices, and it just makes it near impossible to be a farmer in any sort of industrial nation. So you basically have a whole market that just doesn't work. Like you have to step in and do something. Or, of course, you could get rid of the market and just buy from other places. But one issue with this is a lot of the people that are against this price ceiling. So why are groceries expensive? Well, groceries are expensive because everything's expensive. Groceries are still cheaper than other things like housing and utilities. But yes, there's still, groceries are going up. They're not... they're still like relatively cheap. So like you're never gonna get like $1,000 loaf of bread unless like a house costs $20 billion and like gas costs like $30 a gallon. Like groceries are naturally gonna be more cheap than other commodities just because they're so easy to produce. There's just going to be so many of them. But yes, the reason why groceries are going up in price right now is just because like oil is going up, so the cost to transport the groceries are going up. Cost of everything's going up, so in turn you're just going to see general inflation. So also, most farmers act like they are the victims. I'm actually heavy in the farming industry as my family is in it by trade, and you see so many farmers posting on social media saying that they are poor, they rely heavily on government backings and whatnot, when it's completely wrong. You're broke, not poor, and you don't need the government grants. You just use it because it's the cheaper option short term. All these farmers who are acting like they're the victim are not telling people that. Yeah, I think that there is some more bad decision making involved for sure. But it is just, even if you leave it to like obviously the majority of production is always going to come from the largest farmers and like mega corporations. It's just like a fact of the matter. So like these places are just going to so easily produce food, it's just going to struggle to make the market work how it should. So grains should have a price floor. Any other foods? Grain's like the easiest to produce one in the United States, so it's probably like the biggest one, but you could maybe argue like some cattle, like in some like meat. So like some like beef should have base price floors, but it seems like beef and stuff sorts itself out because it's harder naturally to raise cows. Like you need the grain to raise the cows. So ultimately, if you do the grain price setting, the other markets kind of work themselves out. So I don't think you need as much involvement in the other like farming industries as much because they're a little bit more specialized. But when it comes to like the most commonly produced crops, which is going to be grain, they're just so oversaturated, the market struggles to work. They can sell all of their machinery, all of their produce, and all of their land and come out a multimillionaire. It was a two-parter due to character limits. Yep, I get it. Yep. Yeah, for sure. That's one thing people don't realize is that, like, especially farmers, they're quite wealthy. They're just like income poor, but they have some assets they could liquidate for sure. Farmers don't really get to dictate the price of their crops at a minimum level because pretty much all of their seeds are rented out. You rent the seeds from these megacorps who sell it to you at a far cheaper price than buying outright, then demand you give back any seeds that the crop produces. Yeah, there's a bunch of problems in the farming industry, but it's, you know, yeah, it's just like a difficult market. Like the government needs to get involved in some sense, but yes, there's some poor decision making involved. There's some entitlement involved. Like there's all kinds of layers, but from an economics perspective, it's just not a good market that like can just work on its own all the time. It pretty much never has throughout the history of humankind. Like the supply side gets hit by every disaster and it causes like mass famine. Like it's just a really rough market. So it's something that you inevitably need some involvement. Did Zach Happ ever say anything else, or did he just leave with "I'm a male rights activist"? Is this guy really like famous? If so, that's brutal. That was like some like baby's first arguments level of politics. That's very brutal if that's the case. I hope that, yeah, like 50 to 100 viewers a stream. That's crazy to me. That's maybe it's just that particular issue they don't have good arguments against, but man, I probably need to check out their stream and see what the heck is going on, because there's no way that he's not saying more dumb things. That's kind of brutal. I mean, to each their own. People have different topic strengths, but that's brutal. Like, he had plenty of time to find like a source that I asked for and all kinds of stuff. He just kind of gave up. Brutal. That's actually kind of crazy. I guess that should give anyone watching hope that if you want to get into the political game, I guess it doesn't take much much research. Like, you don't actually have to know what you're talking about that much. Yikes. That's kind of brutal. Maybe that was a fake account. I don't know. Brutal. Okay. Most farmers do rent these seeds despite the toxic relationship, because it's like, what are you going to do? Buy tons of wheat seeds for pocket change, buy corrupt business, or buy a handful of wheat seeds out of your own personal expense? Yeah. So zygotes, in or out? In or out? What do you mean? Like, I think that there's some lack of virtue in just killing a zygote for the sake of killing a zygote. The same way it'd be like slapping a fish or something. But I think zygotes, like, you shouldn't be imprisoned for like taking Plan B or something. So we would probably agree there. Like, I don't think you should be like imprisoned for Plan B or anything. No, I mean for medical reasons. Oh, I think if there's more virtuous ways of doing something, you should just do the more virtuous way. So if you could do something that doesn't involve like any entity at all, it's like a purely constructed entity, you should do that. So if we have other methods for getting like stem cell treatment and curing diseases, then we should do that. But if there's like something specific to zygotes you need them for, I'm not like a vegan. Like, I'm not going to say, like, oh, you shouldn't test on any living thing ever. So I guess it's okay as long as it is legitimately for medical stuff and it's as less wasteful as possible. But there's still like a weirdness to it. Like, you should find another way, I guess. The same way, like, when you first make a tool out of a rock, you should still continue finding more uses for that tool. Or it seems like you kind of just wasted that rock or wasted that tool. Like, you should keep going. But, yeah. I don't know. I'm sure I'll run into... It's definitely not going to be Zach Cap. I'll maybe run into someone that has like a more realist position on the pro-choice side that I can argue it with more, and maybe I could change my mind. But as of right now, I'd say like zygotes, it's fine as long as there's like some broader virtuous purpose. But there's still like you should work to do better with it. It's not like so bad that you should be imprisoned. It's just kind of like, why are you doing that? So, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I think I'm going to wrap up the stream. I do actually have to go this time. I've used literally all the time I have allotted for streaming today. So, I will try to stream again tomorrow. Any economic realization recently? I would like to talk more, but I actually got to go. So, we could talk economics or something another time. I greatly appreciate the conversation, Nitro Gold. I appreciate everyone that came out, even the person that called me like a men's rights activist. Thanks for that, I guess. Very great opinion, but yeah, thanks to everyone that came out. Subscribe on YouTube if you're not subscribed. Hit your follows on whatever app you're on. Join the Discord, link in the description. Yeah, see you.